Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Paranormal Karen, funny too. Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Oh, and did I mention she's funny too? Yeah, cha-cha-cha.
All right, everybody, welcome to Paranormal Karen. We are in November. And we're time traveling since I'm taping early. Please join the Patreon at the end of the year. I will let you know what's going on with the podcast and everything, but we're learning tarot. There's 2 extra Paranormal Karen episodes. That may switch. I'll let you know at the end of the year. You may get guests on those or whatever, but I'm changing things up, people. Things got to change. So today, I'm having coffee out of my favorite coffee cup from Marisa LaGuardia, right? Like the airport.
Exactly that.
And from LaGuardia Clayworks, there's so much to talk about. You all know that I love this connection between psychic ability and creativity. And I've known Marisa for a while. I love her ceramics so much. I got my special Reiki infused ceramic cup with pink flowers with me right now. And Marisa, I had you on the Patreon and it was so good. The timing might be off. I think you were on in September. So this might little, and I was like, we have to put this on the big podcast because you are you're an artist, a healer, pretty psychic, all that stuff. Tell us all how you got started.
Sure, absolutely. Also, hi, everyone. Thank you, Karen. Really excited to be here. But yeah, I would say I always wanted to be an artist, even when I was a young kid. My mom always talks about some of the first words I said were crayons, pencils, and markers. So I was like very tapped into that creativity and that expression. And I really used that art in a number of ways, but I was pretty sensitive as a kid, especially to energy and frequency. I wasn't really quite sure what was going on, but I know that I felt energy in my body. And so, because it's not a typical thing to talk about, I didn't really know what to do. My parents really didn't know what to do with me. They knew that I was sensitive and kind of a big emotive kid, but I really used my art as an escape almost. I went in my room and I drew a lot just as a way to process, but also distract myself and dissociate.
A quick question there. Did you have, for example, my father was the psychic one in my family, but he was in such denial, and it was almost like a weird, I almost want to say, I don't want to say a wicked way he used it, but there were certain times you saw him zone in on things and he had it. Did you have a parent or do you have a side of your family where that came from, or were you sort of an aberration to them? They didn't know.
Well, it's funny. So I moved home to Ohio, right? Sort of at the beginning of the pandemic, but at the end of 2020. And there was a lot of things that I still knew that I needed to confront and heal from my past and from my childhood. And since I've been home, I'm still in Ohio now, I'm really learning a lot more about my family. Actually, coincidentally enough, I'm going to a seance at my aunt's house, at my great aunt's house. Yes, just tonight, a little later, we're going to a seance. My aunt connected with a medium who wants to channel my great-grandmother or an older relative. I can't remember her exact relation, but to give my great aunt some peace, because she just had a tough childhood. And so I think channeling through this medium will give her some peace. So I'm uncovering some really exciting things about my family. And I do feel like, especially on my father's side, there is that connection to, psychic ability and energy. My father is also a Reiki practitioner, as well as his sister. And we got our Reiki master certification together, which was such a special moment for me. So yeah, as I'm here, I'm learning about it. I definitely think my family is powerful. My grandmother read tea leaves, but they had to do it in secret. It's a very common thing. So I'm looking forward to learning that.
This is a whole new wonderful thing.
I know.
I have to ask you really quick about the seance.
Sure.
So wait a minute. Your great aunt that is alive or passed?
She's alive, but her mother is passed.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yes. Yes, thank you for clarifying. I'm still trying to figure out all the nuts and bolts of it myself. But yeah, we're going, and my aunt, who is her daughter, so she's actually my cousin. You know how big families go. It's like she's old enough to be my aunt, but she's actually my cousin. Anyways, she invited me because she's like, I want you to come because you're, she couldn't really figure out how to describe, my association, but she wants me to be there. And there's other members of my family. And my aunt's going to be there too.
And weirdly, but LaGuardia, so that's Italian, right?
Yes.
So there must have been some. I know I'm already off on a tangent. I know we had this all figured out.
It's okay. It happens. There's lots to talk about.
Yeah. So there's a lot of. It's so funny. The lady that I rent from is like Christian-y, over the top Christian Italian, and yet she like embraced me like no one else. Like I can tell she has something psychic going on, but she's not supposed to believe in it. But also there's all kinds of stuff which, it's funny. People feel free to believe what they want, but like the evil eye, that's kind of from Italy and stuff like that. That's Did your family sort of adhere to those that could be true?
Definitely, my grandmother on my mother's side was very superstitious. She had a particular practice I remember her doing where she used oil and water as, I don't know if she did it for divination purposes or protection, but she would do that. And then also anytime I had a headache, she would think that it was the evil eye. So she would bless me. I remember she would pray over me and kind of, make the sign of the cross over my head because she thought somebody cursed me. So there was those elements that I don't remember so much, but a little glimmers that I'm really hoping to connect as I just learn more about my ancestry. I'm actually the place that I'm sitting in the park right now. There's a huge, beautiful park where I grew up. It's about 3,000 acres. It's really, really special. And my father grew up around this area. And so my grandmother and then her sister both have birdhouses in this area. So I always go and hang out in this place. So they're hanging out with me today, and they got cicadas in the background, and it's really special. So it's very much connected to my roots in this time of life.
Christopher Penn. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's it. Go ahead. Christopher Penn.
Christopher Penzak was on the show years ago. Who I recommend his book all the time, Witch's Shield. He's a real witch like runs a church. I don't know why that makes him any more witch than anyone else, but he writes these fantastic books, and he talks about his grandmother and doing the evil eye with some oil and water and a pin or something like that. And it was very, very interesting. That I love those things that have been passed down. And it's a funny conversation because so I just had my second bat in my apartment, which
I saw that on Instagram.
Yes, probably there's more by the time this comes out, because everybody's kind of like, if there's one, there's more, and if you have two, so whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But my friend, one of my woo-woo friends, the first thing when I said another bat, he said, your father died right after the first bat showed up, and my mom doesn't. I know, and my mom's not doing too well. And I was kind of like, it interested me, and I said to the lady downstairs, the lady that should be getting all the bats out, I just kind of mentioned it to her like that. Like, that's kind of weird that I'd go all my life without bats, even living in this area, and all of a sudden I have two, and I have two sick parents. And there's one more thing that is a weird clue that we wonder how long my mom will be here, and she said, I'm not too much for superstition. And I kind of thought, what's the difference between superstition or an omen or a sign or knowing? Just weird on that topic. Because I think superstition, people think, silly superstition, but it's kind of a different word, I guess. So it's interesting that they had all these, shall we say, beliefs. Is that a better way? Or were they really out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I feel like it's similar to when people ask, how do I know it's my intuition or it's my anxiety speaking to me? It's kind of like that weird, once you have a better sense of, how you're interpreting things, or if you're connected to fear or not, and using that to drive your perception.
Yeah,
I think maybe things will get more clear, but that's definitely a really, I think, nebulous question. It's like you don't really know, and I feel like it differs from each person.
Yes. Okay.
But,
so you have quite a woo background. Anyone that's going to a seance with their family has a woo. No one does that. That's fantastic.
And it's wild because it was such a hidden part for so long. It's like I'm uncovering these things. Like I didn't know that this was a thing. And even the fact that my aunt is participating, my great aunt is participating in this, I feel like it's just a testament to the shift that's going on collectively. It's like, I feel like this is just, it's all coming to the surface.
Wow.
So I those are my little glimmers of hope. So I feel like it's like, okay, if you are going to a seance and I have, grown up with you and you're this way, and then there's hope.
Excellent. I love that. And I actually have a strange story at the end about again, connecting psychic and creative, because I do believe it's the same strand of energy, you should say. So as a kid, just art is your go-to, is your...
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And when I love that you really are an artist. Did anybody ever deny that in you or say, don't do that? That's not going to pay for anything, that kind of thing?
Yes and no. I think people were often really, what's the word? They were excited and they could tell that I was really serious and I had skill, especially as a kid. And so I had teachers when I was in school, pull my parents aside and be like, hey, you need to get her art lessons. So there were people outside of my family that really kind of helped direct them. But the older I got, the more interest I had in it. I ended up going to an art undergrad, and then I also got my master's in art as well. Both degrees are in painting. And so I remember when I was looking at colleges, my parents were with me on the tour, and I remember them asking the guide, okay, what kind of jobs can she get? Like, how can you make money here? And so there was that underlying, yes, you can be what you want, but you got to make sure you support yourself. And so that's why I went the typical route of like, okay, well, if I want to be an artist, quote unquote, then I need to go to school for it. And I need to have these things under my belt to prove that I'm valid, sort of thing. And so that kind of really influenced the work that I was making too. I think one of the things, as I'm growing creatively, I'm really trying to let go of the previous definitions and conditionings that I had growing up around what an artist is. And, it's not necessarily a painter who has art in a museum. That's not the only way that you can be an artist and exist and support yourself. And so it took me a really long time to start shedding that and allow myself to embody the identity that is me as an artist versus what I think people should be. And that's sort of where I'm at right now. So if anyone is curious, looking at my work, I do have a website with my portfolio on it. I have an artist website, MarisaLaGuardia.com. And then I have LaGuardia Clayworks, which is my ceramics business. The portfolio website really is kind of like a time capsule of, you can really, if you know me or you're familiar with, my process, you can sort of see the evolution within that. But I haven't really made new work since maybe 2019 or so. I have some that I made in the pandemic, and I'm starting to make paintings again, but in a different context. Like I really want them to be sort of different, I guess more authentic. And so, yeah, it's like, go ahead.
That's exactly, there's a I don't know what it is, and maybe in 2024, everything will be the same, but I feel like there's an evolution going on right now. Like even this podcast needs to evolve to a different place for me. I don't know what the change is, if it's video or it's not as like every week, or it's not because what you were just describing sounded so free. Like you go to school to paint, and we're going to paint a bowl of fruit that looks exactly like that bowl of fruit, and that's your skill. And then you were saying how it's, even the word authentic, you're growing and you're changing. So it should all change with you. Do you know what I mean?
Correct. Absolutely. And I love, art is such a, I keep thinking there's a couple of words that I always think about when I just associate it with my art practice. And I really like the word archive.
Medicallyspeaking.com is a prophetic shop that focuses on your inner alchemical transmutation. And I needed an alchemical transmutation to say alchemical transmutation. See, Toria, you did it. When you're looking for activations to change your aura, wisdom and insight to heal your past, and alchemy to live your highest vibrancy, you will most certainly enjoy the array of offerings you will find at hermeticallyspeaking.com. Created through the teaching of the Hermetics, Toria, who's been on my podcast many times, provides personalized guidance that caters a feast specifically from the higher realms to you. You'll leave each session feeling empowered and loved, having gained ancient knowledge for your soul's nourishment and growth. Believe me, I know. I've worked with Toria and she is terrific. Everything you need is within you, so come remember, activate, and expand your knowing at hermeticallyspeaking.com. Oh my goodness. Okay, everyone, I know that last section cut off fast. And the reason it happened is because I live in Utica and Utica hates me. That's what happened there. I can't. So my card filled up and I'm so glad I caught that exactly because we would have been talking for like 20 more minutes. So Marisa,
sure.
Where that ended, you said you were talking about your older works that are on the other site and how you loved the word archive. So can you pick it up from there and be patient with my whatever the heck is going on with my life?
Absolutely. I got all the time in the world. I blocked off like 3 hours today. So we're good. We got it. But yeah, there are a couple of words that I really like to use maybe as inspiration or anchors for my creative practice. And archive is one of them. I'm not necessarily creating, like looking at archives or information or things like that as inspiration outside of me, but I am looking at the work that I've created in the past as an archive for my own progression creatively. So I was talking about also how I encourage people, even if you don't consider yourself an artist, even though I think everyone is an artist in their own way, to start making work as soon as possible, because then you'll have something tangible that represents your own progression. And you can look at that and say, oh, I noticed this here, and then I repeated this here, and then it changed this way. So you have that moment of stability as you're changing and growing as a reference.
This might actually be too strict, but I saw a guy, and it's interesting because I just the little bit of drawing and looking through drawing books, I really have I'm amazed at how fast you can make progress, especially when you just intune your observation, But I saw this guy, and he said, you're told to draw the same thing for a year, and he picked like a bird. And he goes through this evolution of how he's just drawing this bird. And then he was like, what if the bird wore hats? And then he was drawing the bird with hats. And then he was like, what if the bird had political views? And it sort of all evolved. I don't know if I want my tattoo to be the Japanese cherry blossoms, like the cup you randomly sent me that had like pink flowers that look kind of like cherry blossoms. And I thought, start drawing them, start painting them, start figuring out paint through this one thing. So that's my project right now. But also, so you have this great tip for people because there's this, I got to buy all this stuff. It's got to be good. I have a hang up. Like I haven't bought canvas yet to paint anything on because I'm like, well, canvas, that's almost permanent. You changed my life with this next piece of information. Tell everyone what to do.
Sure. Yeah. I do teach art part-time. And I have different levels of experience with teaching adults and children and everybody in between. But one of the things I noticed was exactly what you were saying, Karen. People are nervous about the preciousness of their materials because they spend a lot of money. This is expensive paint. This is an expensive canvas. So I've also had professors in school have us just prime with gesso cardboard. Just get some cardboard and paint on that so it's less precious. Get some newspaper and doodle on that. Make a drawing in the dirt, or if it snowed out, see what happens. Really consider expanding what your materials are and use whatever you have on hand to kind of get you started as a warm up. And then eventually, if it feels good, then you can make your way to painting on canvas. But I bet if you experiment with a little bit more playfulness, you might realize that you really love making dirt paintings, and that's what you want to do instead of just, paint on canvas. So I think that will lead you to something more exciting and more you than kind of going a traditional route. And especially if you're starting out.
Yeah, I think this would be my archive, but I'm still doing it a little. But I wanted to make incense burners, and the best way they looked was I started with the mandalas, and now I'm like, maybe it's time to spread that out a little bit. So, and I was even talking to you on the Patreon, maybe I want to break glass, maybe I want to work with glass and mirrors, but also I tell people rearrange the food on your plate in an interesting way,
right?
And so I have this huge I kind of hate wasting things, and I use Rocket books all the time and Elfin books, which are the ones that are, their paper is actually whiteboard, so you could just wipe it off, so you're using the same thing over and over. But I have this big astrology book that is for 2023, and half the book is not used. So every morning I get up, and on the pages that already have been used, I use a sketch pencil, and sometimes the writing or what's already in their stuff makes it even more interesting. So I loved it when you put that tip out there for people. And we were talking about when you do your ceramics, which is so funny because I just saw on TikTok somebody had like a what is that table called that goes around on the ceramics?
The wheel? The
wheel.
Table? What do you? The wheel, yes.
I couldn't remember wheel.
You got it.
Someone had like a 4-inch wheel. Oh, did you hear that thunder?
That was thunder.
That was thunder. Severe thunderstorms, as usual, every day. Here they are.
Oh, man.
You should hear them when there's a bat flying around your apartment. That's the whole thing out here. So somebody was doing it on TikTok with literally like a 4-inch wheel and making like, I don't know if they were making shot glasses or what. It was adorable. But as I'm watching this, my first instinct with anything creative is I need that. And then I was like, wait a minute. Remember what you talked to Marissa about? People think that's a daydreamy, just I'm going to run my hands. It's going to be like the movie Ghost. But it's actually really just a skill, isn't it?
It is. And it's very physically taxing. When I vend at fairs, people often talk about, I love the videos online and I see this and that, and it must be really relaxing. And one of the things I always like to tell people too is that the clay is like a mirror. It really, if you aren't centered, if you're not focused, then it will reflect that right back to you. So if I'm talking to them, I say, oh yeah, if I'm having a bad day, and they'll usually interrupt me and they'll say, oh, it helps you relax. And I usually say, no, it actually reflects that bad day. And I make lots of mistakes. So in order to really make something, at least when you're using the wheel, or honestly, I feel like with anything, if you're not in a headspace that will allow the creativity to flow through you, then you'll have a lot of blocks and it might be more challenging. But even with that, you can make art about the blocks that you're experiencing. Or maybe I made a ceramic piece that is just all quote unquote failures, and I have a whole show about that. So it's like really however you look at it and however you see your circumstance is going to change the result and the value in it. So that's really important to remember too.
I love that. A gallery of mistakes. That's fantastic because isn't that the rule of like if something is imperfect, it was really made for you or something like that. One of my favorite things at Mass Mocha, because I really like the crazy modern art, like the way out there, what is this kind of thing, was guy had a big jar of ashes and it was labeled critics reviews.
Love that. Yes. That's amazing.
Yes.
Mass Mocha in North Adams. Yeah, because you're nearby. Yeah,
not now, but when my parents used to live in Pittsfield, that was my favorite thing to do. We went once.
Oh, Pittsfield.
Yes, and we went once, and you walked through the room, and literally pieces of paper fell. That's what it was. It was pieces of paper falling. and it was timed, or there was so much to it, and it was just supposed to be what the ocean sounds like. And
Wow.
I'm not sure how close it was to that, but you were just walking through it was magical to walk through that and just be like, we're walking through paper falling, like what's going on? It was great.
That's amazing. Yeah, I used to work there. I had a museum education internship, I think in 2015. So it's really cool that you've been in that space. It's a really unique area.
It is. I bet you I was there when you were working there.
Maybe you were. That would be so cool.
We used to go all the time. That was really one of my favorite places to just, and whenever I see, I guess, MoCA, that's all modern museums, right? They kind of use that?
As far as I know, yes. Don't quote me on that, though.
Okay, I got to I live right next to like a giant art school, and I swear to God, I cannot get through their website to see anything. And every time I say to someone, have you ever been? And they go, we can't get through their website. So anyways, and it's huge. It's like I would take classes there. So you were talking about when people have blocks. And this is what I think is really important, because like you talk about how play is important in life. And I really will say, especially this winter, the first winter I had to live in, just sitting and focusing on the bottles and painting and learning. And even my sister was like, you see how they get better every time? You know what I mean? Like, she's really encouraging. But she's right. When you do something, it keeps getting better. It was my sanity. So how do you help people to just sit down and do it?
I mean, that I feel like is going to look different for everyone. My friend of mine just shared a statistic with me, and I'm going to butcher this, but essentially she said that, you have to do, let's say, I think maybe 400 times. You have to do something around 400 times in order for it to stick in your brain. But then she said, if you're playing while you're learning, it deducts that by 40%. And you're able to get to that goal faster because you're playing. And so I think one of the things that's the most important for me is to really notice when I'm writing a story about something, or, setting myself up for failure before I even try.
Yes.
I can't, I tell my students, create, don't compare. So it's just like when I'm looking out at how someone else is doing something, or, they got this accolade and I applied for it 7 times and I still didn't get it. If you're getting, I'll never be chosen or whatever, if you're stuck in the narrative of whatever, you're creating walls around yourself and blocking that creativity. So I think getting to know yourself and kind of catching your stories and just allowing yourself to just kind of experiment a little bit at a time. Don't go in there and expect huge shifts. Just, maybe I'll spend a minute a day just sort of drawing circles on the paper and just not even thinking about it. I know, Karen, you mentioned something that you like to do before you do automatic writing is that you just scribble, and that kind of gets you open. So, what are some techniques that you can find and do? Maybe you shake your body. When we were talking on the Patreon, I definitely talked about the body and ceramics and how that really opened me up to my physicality because of the, I was making paintings and drawings, and that media is very psychologically oriented. It's visual. You see with your eyes and you're not really thinking about your body when you're looking at something. That's why I feel like the, social media and just your phone in general is such a vacuum, because you just get sucked into that. And I just totally forget about my body. And so, I think another way to play is to connect to your body, dance around, go outside, do things that feel good for you. And I think the more you get to know yourself, I talked about getting to know your filter on the Patreon too. How do you perceive? What are things that you notice? What's something that's exciting to you? What's something that's sparking your curiosity? How can you access that part of you, maybe that's too afraid to come out, or to give yourself space to feel safe to express that? So it really is a lot of internal work and inquiry with as little judgment as possible. I mean, I know that's hard. I'm notoriously self-critical, but step by step, I think incrementally is really the way to do that. And like you were saying, Karen, even your sister was saying, every time you do something, you get better at it. You're building that muscle memory and you're getting that familiarity every time you do it.
Yes. And I always carry a little tiny notebook and a little tiny pen. And I remember when my dad had his stroke and he was laying in hospital, it was actually a really funny picture, but I was like, wow, I showed it there's more thunder, just so no one thinks it's demons, although it could be also where I live. But my sister's like, wow, that looks right. And I took these little courses on. There's something called Domestica. They're like $10 a course, and there's always something in them that's great. But I don't usually finish them. But for $10, if you learn one thing, and she was talking about one of them was about observation, and how she saw something and then she drew her observation of it, and it was really quite different. But I loved it, and I always wonder if Andy Warhol was very funny. And the reason was because he did those paintings of like a can of soup or something so simple. And that is a lot of what comedy is about. Like yesterday, I don't want to force jokes on anybody, but like there was somewhere in a joke where it fit, like, I can't stop thinking about cornbread because geez Louise, cornbread is neither corn nor bread. So that's where you start with your joke. You're like, what is this? So he had that. Just, people go, it's just a can of soup. But that was his observation. And it seems very connected to comedy. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But
no. Yeah, I like that because it's also taking away that label of this is, it is or it isn't art. I worked in another museum after I graduated undergrad, and we had an exhibition where the two artists, they worked in collaboration together. They recreated random objects from their studio out of polyurethane foam to the point where it looked like the actual object. So they spent hours and months and years recreating these things, and they filled an entire room with 432 objects. And I would lead people through, and it would be, a dirty bucket or a giant tire, or they're just like random thing, a backpack, like random things that. And a lot of times if I wasn't leading people through, they would walk right by this gallery and they wouldn't even stop to think, because they would say, oh yeah, this is just a room full of junk. But when we stopped to have the conversation and I would ask them, do you think this is art? We had a beautiful conversation that stemmed from that, because it really opens up that definition and expands your capacity to really think, okay, well, what is art? I talk to my students about, what's a drawing? A drawing is when you make a mark, but you can make a mark with anything. It doesn't have to be charcoal on paper. It can be, if you wipe your nose on your sleeve, could be a drawing. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you think about how you can, just rewrite that definition, then everything gets a lot bigger and there's a lot more opportunity for you to really tap into specifically what looks exciting to you. And now it's tough then because everything's bigger and it's like, okay, well, what do I choose? But then you go back to, okay, but what gets me excited? What, is the thing that I can't stop thinking about? So once you take time to know yourself and to really figure out what that is, then things become a little bit more clear.
Yes. And it's even like old t-shirts. If you want to cut up old t-shirts, see what you could do with them. Like, I love that stuff. I want to actually, when we come back after the break, talk about some, like, because I believe you're channeling when you're doing art. So let's sort of jump onto that metaphysical place. And I have a really interesting story that somebody told me this week about exactly about this. So hang on, folks. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. How's that spiritual awakening going? I know. Don't worry. Help is here. HighlySpiritualPerson.com is a haven for spiritual misfits and empaths navigating spirituality and mental health. My friend Camille has a plethora of resources on her site to help you on your spiritual journey, even if you're just starting out. It includes individual and collective Reiki sessions, personalized guided meditations, sleep affirmation tracks, and so much more. Camille has so much to offer. She's going to be on my podcast in December. I can't wait to talk to her. Her blog posts and podcast episodes explore spirituality and are great for folks carving out their own path. She has written 2 easy to follow guidebooks, one on breathwork and the newest book book is called Manifestation is Easy, and it features 22 step-by-step manifestation techniques, as well as tips and advice on how to overcome the most common blocks and start changing your reality. Go to highlyspiritualperson.com. I promise you, you will get lost in how much information is in there. It's one of my favorite rabbit holes.
Okay, so I'm going to put a whole bunch of things in a bowl and mix it up and then ask you to analyze it for me.
Okay.
So I had someone that did a mushroom trip and suddenly came back as an artist and was doing all kinds of art. Like it was one of these where this is what I think happened. And it was almost an odd sort of transition where the person, they had this. So when you're doing an ayahuasca or a mushroom, I feel like you're expanding. That's the thing people don't understand. It's why I always warn about things follow you through. You're almost expanding your channel. So I think this person that did this tapped into some sort of artist channel. Now this could be just a frequency. It actually could be, I think it could be a spirit or a person or something, but whatever this person did, they blew open their regular channel and started doing art. And that's kind of my theory, that I think art is so connected. Melissa Gilbert wrote that book, Big Magic, which I really, it was Elizabeth Gilbert. And she had some stories in there about poets that would feel the poem coming and would have to run and almost grab it by its tail and run in the house and write it. Or she has a really interesting story there about how she was writing this really, pretty original, complex story, and she met someone and gave them a hug. Again, more thunder. And she went home, and then her life got all crazy. She couldn't even start this. Hadn't told the other woman about it. Ran into the woman like a couple years later, and she said, "What are you writing?" And the woman told her story back to her exactly. And Elizabeth was saying how she thought when they had first met and hugged, the story went from her to the other lady. And you have to kind of read it in the book, but I kind of think there's something to that. Like she says how the Greek never called anyone a genius because that was too much pressure on the artist. But if you said you were visited by genius, it meant it was open to everyone. So you coming from this very actually woo-woo, in the closet or not, woo-woo family, do you feel like you're channeling? Because when you were describing how you do your ceramics, I thought that's the same as when I sit and do tarot. Same energy, same focus. You got to be in that moment.
Yeah, I do think it is similar energy, and it's, I think if anybody looks at the work that I create, I do think it's very inherently spiritual, because of where I'm drawing my inspiration from. A lot of it recently has changed. It's more nature oriented. So I'm looking at patterns in sacred geometry that's inherent in nature, and I'm combining them together to make almost like mandalas or scenes and other things. But to put it simply, I mean, yes, I do think it's channeling. And the more I got comfortable with being in my physical body, I think that's something we talked more about on the Patreon. But really, like I always say that I discovered my body in 2019. But that was also, I really met myself in my body, and I committed to doing what I could to feel safe in it and to get comfortable with the discomfort of some of the sensations that I was experiencing. If I'm around someone who is angry, it was easy for me to pick up that anger, but also experience what they were experiencing in their body. It's like, okay, my heart would get tight, or my head would hurt if they were angry. Like I would mirror their frequencies. So once I started to really pay attention to that and try to recalibrate myself and be like, okay, and I would do it very gradually. So I work a lot in the bathtub. I know you really love the bath too, Karen. And that's really where I do a lot of my spiritual connection, because I feel like water as a conduit. I mean, we could talk a whole lot more about water, but and I really slowly, I made sure I called in protection, and I Reiki'd the water, and I did everything that I could so I could feel safe. And I would just, allow whatever sensations to come up. And I would set the intention, please come up slowly or in a way that I can handle. And I would just sort of like sit with that discomfort or sensation. And I would also, I would allow in my guides or a helper that I've been working with, like, okay, you can come in, but the door is only cracked a little bit. So, as soon as I started to, get comfortable with that sensation in my physical body, then I really feel like that opened up where I can sort of tune in really quickly. I do feel like my clairvoyance, my clear seeing is starting to get stronger. I feel like I always had that, but now when I'm working and sometimes, it's when I'm doing the laundry, or a lot of the times if I'm doing yoga, I'll get ideas and inspiration to the point where if I'm doing yoga in my house, I'll put my sketchbook right next to me because I know that I might get an idea. It's like I need to make space for that to happen. And then I need to recognize what it feels like when something comes in. Lately, if I'm pulling cards for myself, I'll say something while I'm shuffling. And then a lot of the times, if I'm doing oracle cards, the phrase will be on the oracle card. That just happened a couple of days ago. I said something, I was like, that was weird. And then I pulled, the card came out and I was like, well, that's where that came from. So it's like, but it's a constant exploration and it's a constant play. It's like, it really is just, I know what I feel like when I'm open. I'm kind of getting that muscle memory. Like, all right, this is how my body feels when I'm not gripping or in a story, or I'm just open and relaxed, but also stable and strong and protected. It's like this sweet spot, And so if I can remember, another thing that I like to do is, like, if I'm in that flow state or in that ease, I ask my cells and my body to remember this feeling, or I like say, okay, subconscious, like, ingrain this in my body so I can like tap into it faster. So it's almost like I'm always having a conversation with things too, which is something that I've done, I think, since childhood. I really believe in animism a lot. I really think everything has energy, especially animals, but objects too.
I could not agree with that more. And it's interesting that some people don't have an inner dialogue. And I have always had an inner dialogue. I don't know that I'm an animal communicator, but I'm always talking to the animals or the trees, but I know exactly what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I feel like that's a really roundabout way of just saying yes. I do feel like it's a similar thing. And I keep going back to this, but every person is really unique and different. And so the methods that work for me might not work for you. So it's just like, figure out who you are and figure out your filter and how you perceive the world, because humans are subjective and everyone's truth is very personal and specific to them.
That sweet spot too, like, when I lived in Los Angeles, I had this chair, and that was the chair I read in, and I sat in that chair every day and did my readings from there. And people would sit in this chair and be like, oh my God, this is the greatest chair ever. I feel fantastic. Because I opened a channel there. I opened a way the light came in, and I just finally hit that spot here on the couch here. And that's just a tip for people. If you have like an inspirational spot where you meditate, or that spot is for that, or even that, I've told some people I have a jar of water that I program, and I drink that water before I want this. So sometimes it's just making that mental note to, to remind yourself or to remind your body. I love what you said there about telling the cells or telling your subconscious, this is it. This is how we do it. So when you talk about, this is a weird, my issue, and you connect this right to art. I have this written down right in front of me. Vulnerability is like, I think I can't find that line. I can't tell if I'm really vulnerable or not vulnerable at all. And you talk about this, about exploring your relationship to being seen and vulnerable. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, that's actually something that I'm really working through personally. And I'm grateful because I've accumulated a lot of tools and resources to help just identify, again, who I am and how I move through the world. And I've used human design and astrology as anchor points. But in my astrology, there's do you know about Chiron? I feel like yes.
A little bit, but I'm not that good with astrology, so feel free to talk to me like I don't. No, Chiron is.
Yeah, Chiron. Well, Chiron is an asteroid, and it's just another part of your natal chart. But Chiron is the wounded healer. So, if I remember correctly, the story of Chiron is that he's a gifted healer, but he has his own wounds that he can't heal. So he can heal everyone else but himself. And so when you look at your Chiron placement, it's sort of, and even the glyph for it looks like a key, actually, which I think is very cool. But if you look at your Chiron placement, that is sort of the key. It's like your core wound, but that's also where your power is. So it's like once you heal, it's like the poison is the medicine sort of thing. And so my Chiron actually is around creative expression and vulnerability and being seen. It's in Leo, which is all about, I mean, you're a Leo, it's about performing and creativity and expression and all of that in my 10th house, which is your career. So it's just interesting because I had a lot of blocks around my career as it relates to my creative life because of the wounds that I was using as a filter to kind of make my decisions moving forward. And a lot of that does have to do with being seen and being vulnerable. And so, there are a lot of, I guess, hard truths within that. I mean, not everyone is going to like you. Not everyone is going to be resonant with the work that you make. And there is going to be criticism. So, the more you can be stable within yourself to say, okay, yes, because, I mean, you talk about this on the podcast all the time. A lot of the times people are just projecting their own wounds onto you. They're seeing the things about you that are activating them. And so they project onto you. But really, a lot of the times it doesn't have anything to do with you. So what I've been trying to do is, just cultivate that stability within myself to be like, okay, just put it out there because someone might connect with it. And that's more important than someone being like, this is bullshit, So being vulnerable, being seen, because that, I mean, some people make art and they never show anyone, and that's also okay. So identifying what is your art practice mean to you? What is the function of it? And knowing that it might change, as you grow. We talked about that earlier. It's like, as you shift, your work's going to shift with you, but even having something to start from, I feel like is going to be really important. Let's see.
You know what else on that point? This is kind of a weird segue, but I am in this weird spot where people are telling me I'm nice, and I don't know that nice is what I want to be, because nice is attached to people pleasing or kind, or you know what I mean? Like, we're supposed to be nice, and I think I'm outgrowing that. I know that sounds terrible, but like, I think I'm okay to get someone out of my life without an excuse and without telling them. Just like, I think it's time to go. And that, I think, is something where we've been so programmed, nice, the other person's feelings and this and that I got on I don't know where I got on this weird segue. You were talking about something about not about vulnerability, but about, this is a weird thing about people not liking you or your art. I truly believe that we did cross over into something. Jessa tuned me into this, of that there's not two timelines now. There's like a million. And I feel like we're gazing through other ones. And to me, there are certain people out there right now that look like robots. Like, if you're asking me about the Matrix, those are those non-people characters. Whatever. I don't know why, but everyone looks so different. So now it isn't even about this person likes me and this one doesn't. It's about millions of different perceptions and how your work mirrors them. So it's kind of it's even more of a confusing time. It's a weird analogy is like, in comedy, you had three shows. You had Letterman, The Tonight Show, and Conan, and that was it. Those were your key to your success, and that was it. Those levels right there. And then the internet came along, and all of a sudden, people could find you that couldn't find you before. And that's where I feel like we are now. Is they're so open. Everything is way open.
Yes, and so I mean, I think that's a really great point. Going back to the niceness thing, I mean, it's easier for people to if you're nice, that means you're being the person that they want you to be, kind of thing. It's like, oh yes, Karen is still this way. But then when you step into your authenticity, people have to grapple with, the person who they think that you are isn't mashing up with the person who you really are. So it's a whole, and that comes with a lot of baggage. You know, a part of the biggest thing that I'm working through now is like, I don't want people to project on me because I'm sensitive to their energies and I can literally feel it in their body. And so it's like, I don't want to, you know, cause them discomfort. So I'm like, I'm just going to be small. You know what I mean? That's sort of how I survived growing up. It's like, okay, I know that I'm big and powerful. I'm just going to be small to make you comfortable. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. So I'm going to be uncomfortable. And so I feel like, you know, as things are shifting, especially as the nodes shifted in astrology, I mean, we're moving into Aries, which is my sun. And it's just like, you know, I really have right now, it's like full speed ahead. Fuck you. I'm being myself. Sorry. You know, and I don't feel like I've ever been empowered to stand in that until now. And it's so it led up to, again, these small shifts. I really think about, I love the idea of compound interest. It makes me anxious when I think about it with my credit card, but if I recontextualize it I'm investing in myself with these small shifts that will grow exponentially over time, and I will see these results eventually. So it's, again, with your art, you can also use that as an archive and say, okay, this is my timeline of me growing and changing and becoming myself again. But with the vulnerability thing, you know, the more stable you are within yourself, the less those things will affect you. And we didn't really talk about this at all, but because I have such a sensitivity, we'll say, I also have to do a ton of clearing work. And I'm hoping that I don't have to do that as much, but you know, with human design, you have your energy centers and they're either defined or they're undefined. And the undefined centers are very receptive to external conditioning. And so now that I know which centers of mine are open, kind of like a bowl, they're holding all that conditioning, I really pay extra attention to, you know, my sacral chakra is open. I'm a projector. I don't have constant access to that creative energy, but because it's open, I can take in a lot of information and I can really process that in a unique way and say, okay, well, I can make art about this and I can make art about that. But it also is a place where I can hold a lot of things that aren't necessarily something I should hold on to. So I'm like, okay, I got to clear my sacral. I got to clear my head. You know, I got to clear these things. And the more I get to know myself, the more I'm like, okay, those aren't my words. That's my conditioning speaking. That's not me. Get it out of here. You know? So It really is a lot of like clearing and getting to know and giving yourself space to explore and to play. And also another thing I want to talk about is just the time it takes to do things. I mean, you know, our society is really focused on, you know, I wanted it shipped here yesterday. It's not here. Amazon next day shipping. Like we just are so conditioned to this quickness. It's like, I want this to happen now. Why am I not healed already? Blah, blah, blah. But I mean, Jessica talks about that all the time. It's like, she's like, you are doing so much work. Just because you don't perceive yourself growing and changing in a certain way doesn't mean that it's not happening. So that's also an important thing to just keep in mind as people are growing their creative expression. It's like, it's going to take time and it's going to look different than what you think it is, but that's better because you're giving it space to be true and honest.
I love that. And you know, I'll just as we're wrapping up here, I can't remember where we met, but I have your snake bowl, which is amazing. Even so much, but it really was, you know, I'm in this strange place where I don't really live here. I don't own things. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to get rid of stuff because when you move into a furnished place, you have their crap and then you have your crap. And so I never find anything. So I also am sometimes robbing myself of things that I really want. And you know, I have an obsession with your coffee cups. And the other night I was like, I have to have a coffee cup. I have to have a coffee cup. And I have it. And I just want to tell you, it is, if I had paid $1 million for it, it would have been worth $1 million because it's like, I'm like, this is my coffee cup and I'm having my coffee at my cup. You know what I mean? It was this psychological, like treating yourself well with nice things. And I have never done that. So I just want to say, I really, I love your coffee cup. That's what I was trying to say.
Thank you. That makes me so happy. I really appreciate that. Yeah. Having something that, go ahead.
I was just say you didn't even know I was obsessed with Japanese cherry blossoms, and you sent me the pink flowers that look like Japanese cherry blossoms.
it all lines up.
Yes, it does. All right. This was fantastic. Tell everyone where they can find you, where they can get their own beautiful coffee cup, all the stuff. Tell everybody.
All right. There's a lot of places that you can find me. And it's November. So hopefully everything is a little bit more concise. But at this current moment, you can find my ceramic work at LaGuardiaClayworks.com. It is the holiday season now, so commissions are definitely closed. I really am trying to be mindful of how much time I'm spending in the studio. So I don't have a lot of work available all the time, but you can follow me on Instagram at LaGuardia Clayworks and just see my progression. If you want to see some other work, you can go to MarisaLaGuardia.com. My first name only has one S in it, and LaGuardia is spelled like the airport. And if you want to book a Reiki session with me, you can also do that through LaGuardia Clayworks or MarisaLaGuardia.com. And if you want to contact me, email me at marissa@MarisaLaGuardia.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I loved this. I love this connection with art and creation. And I just think you are so eloquent. So thank you so much for coming on.
I had a blast. Thank you, Karen.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. You can go to rontowski.com and book a reading or join the Patreon or something like that. And if not, I'll see you next Friday. Thanks to Mike at Uno Rising Media. Have a great day, everybody.
Paranormal Karen, she's a spooky kind of queen. Paranormal Karen, she's an angel without wings. Comedian, ghost hunter, conscious exploring. She's a funny gal and a real woo pal. She's Paranormal Karen.